I thought I'd stand up too. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, however. And I love the football analogies, and I love the Maginot Line thing. The football analogies remind me of that great Bill Cosby sketch where he talks about playing street football. Did anybody else in the room, like I did, play street football when I'm growing up? He talks about sending his brother down to the corner. He says, catch the bus at the next corner. Tell him to open the door, and I'll throw the ball to you. That's the kind of football I grew up playing. And usually it was go down to the Lotus's car and break left, and then I'll throw the pass to you. We've been doing a lot of that kind of passing and that kind of short running over the last few decades in local government. And yes, we made great progress in 2004 with Prop 1A, but that was actually at the price of dropping a ballot measure that provided much more substantial protections for local taxes. And for those of you who don't recall, that measure would have required the voters to approve the state borrowing any or taking any local taxes. By our count, as of right now, cities have had $11 billion of their property taxes, counties much more, and special districts a little less than cities, taken by the state to be used to fund schools with, as Fred pointed out, or perhaps it was another speaker, without really increasing funding for schools. I mean, that's perhaps the greatest tragedy and stupidity of this system, is constantly sacrificing local services so the state can grow its other parts of its budget. So we've had Prop 1A, and yes, we had a loan this year instead of a rate. It was still 8% of the local property tax. The state, with great prodding by CSAC and the League and the special districts, finally agreed to let us sell that promise of repayment, and that was good. But you know what? It cost the state $275 million. That loan, what I would refer to as a payday loan, the kind of debt that Fred was pointing out, they're constantly piling up, had an effective interest rate of over 6%, which is not what I consider a good interest rate. It's exactly why Wall Street loves California, is that people make a lot of money off of us. And one thing you should know, the next time they do that kind of loan, they're probably not going to allow us to securitize it, or they're not going to pay for it, because it is so expensive for the state to do. So for those of you who got your money this year, that's great. For those of you who think you'll get it next time, if we're looking at deficits for 5 or more years, I wouldn't count on it. I think the state is going to have other priorities than helping us deal with them borrowing their money from us. So with that as a backdrop, and the fact that we came out of the summit with a #1 priority to protect local funds and other priorities dealing with reform of the state-local fiscal relationship and the state government itself, our board of directors adopted those as our priorities for the year. And also with a strong focus on protecting and growing jobs, which is, of course, a great concern of everybody across our state. And what we did is we sat down with some groups that have had similar experiences to us. The California Transit Association, I don't know about the transit system here in Napa County, but transit all over the state is on its knees, in part because a system set up for helping fund transit, whether you like it or not, with the sales tax on gasoline and on diesel, has been cannibalized by the legislature the last 3 years to fund other priorities. Again, when they shift money from transit to fund school buses, they aren't necessarily enriching the school system. They're simply avoiding their responsibility to properly fund schools and the services connected to it. So over the last 3 years, transit has seen $3 billion, transit systems of $3 billion of funding taken away from them. We also sit down with a group called the Alliance for Jobs, the California Alliance for Jobs, a labor management group that also works with us to protect funding for transportation. The city and county officials in the room will remember last summer, well, the governor said he was going to propose borrowing our property taxes reluctantly. He then proposed to steal the city and county share of the highway users tax. Now let me share something with you. There's been a county share of the highway users tax. This is the so-called gas tax. We've jokingly referred to it as HUDA now, the highway users tax account. There's been a county share of that tax since 1922. And a few years later, the cities began to share in that tax. We can't levy that tax, so we have gotten that excise tax, a share of that, 1/3 of it. Cities and counties maintain 81% of the road miles in this state. We get 1/3 of the state highway users tax. I'm surprised it's that good, given how much priority they place on local services in Sacramento. We also get a share of the Prop 42 sales tax. Fred discussed Prop 42 and the allocation of the sales tax on gasoline. 40% goes to the state. Big shocker there, right? 20% to counties, 20% to cities, 20% to transit. What did the governor propose just last week? He proposed eliminating that, raising the excise tax on gasoline, and taking all the money that would have gone to transit and either eliminating it and taking some of it and using it to pay the state's transportation bond debt obligations. So more chicanery, more ridiculousness, more stupidity about how we fund infrastructure in our state. So with that as a backdrop, and last year's attempted raid, which we fought back successfully with the counties, 2 hours before they shut down the budget, they took that proposal out of the budget. And it was actually, as David and others knows, it was probably tied in as well to a fight between Republicans and Democrats over how they were going to put up votes on the Prop 98 issue. It was just bizarre. So we know it's coming back. In fact, I heard, Paul, I don't know if you've heard, I've heard the first rumor that who'd is next. They don't like the governor's proposal, so now they're talking about coming after the highway users tax. So what we did is we sat down with those groups with which we had a common interest and said, we need a short-term reform. We need an immediate reform, because whether you agree that the Constitutional Convention is a good idea, or you want to wait for some of the other longer-term reforms that California Forward's working on and that we want to work with them on, we cannot stand another year or another 2 years of them taking, as they did last year, the property tax loan, $750 million of transit money, $2 billion of redevelopment money, hundreds of thousands of jobs sacrificed. I said to a group yesterday, 3,000, I think the number's 3,000 I got from my friend Paul, who's my counterpart. You're going to meet Paul from the counties. County jobs that would have been lost if they'd taken that local share of the gas tax last year. You know, quite frankly, they don't really care. At the end of the day, they want to balance their budget and they want to get out of town. Everybody calls it a get out of town budget. So what we did is we fashioned, with our allies, a ballot measure that protects, let me go over them very quickly, and you'll hear a little more detail later. Your locally levied taxes, the taxes that you and your voters decide to impose on yourselves for whatever purposes, it protects those taxes. It protects your two major sources of funding for transportation, the highway users tax, Prop 42 funding. Says they can't steal them, can't borrow them anymore either. It eliminates the opportunity to borrow the property tax, because we know the next time they do it, and they're going to do it again, they're going to do it as quickly as they can again, because they need another payday loan. They don't have the ability, it seems, to do this responsibly. They're not going to pay the cost for you to borrow against it, and you're going to be out that money. Right when you need it, they're going to take it away from you. It also provides additional protection for redevelopment. There already is constitutional protection for redevelopment. Let me share with you a little irony here. When we worked on Prop 1A with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the legislature, we were under tremendous pressure not to put additional protections for redevelopment in the measure. The governor said, I'll even sign a ballot argument that says it's not necessary. Well, 2 days after he proposed stealing the redevelopment increment, we went into his office with a copy of the ballot argument, showed it to him, and he said, I don't remember that. And our words to that effect and accent to that effect. And he looked at his staff like, why didn't you tell me about this? You know, it's like nothing seems to mean anything anymore. And last year's proposal to steal the gas tax was unconstitutional, but here's the irony, and our ballot measure addresses it. It would have taken us 3 years to win in court, and even then we wouldn't have won. You know why? Because under our legal system, the courts can't order the legislature to appropriate the money. So we've addressed that in the ballot measure by providing that if we win in court, if they violate the ballot measure and they steal county and city and transportation monies, or if they steal other monies protected by the ballot measure, your property tax or whatever it is, and this includes school parcel taxes, by the way, are covered by the measure, then the court simply has to issue the order and tell the controller to pay the money back to us. No legislative appropriation is necessary. So it's a much faster way to get the money back. We're still going to have to sue the you-know-whats, but we'll get the money back immediately. We've also included a repealer that reaches back. If they violate this measure anytime between the date we filed it and the date of the election, and it would violate it if they did it after the election and the measure passed, then those laws will be repealed. So we've anticipated the kind of shenanigans they're going to engage in up to the election. We're very, very committed to this. We have city officials and others, county officials, other community volunteers all over the state gathering signatures. The other night, the Riverside City Council unanimously said they will each gather 100 signatures. They're either each going to contribute money to the campaign. One of the council members said he's going to gather 1,000 signatures, and he's going to get 10 friends to gather 100 each. That's the kind of passion that city officials are bringing to this, and I urge those of you in this room, if you haven't already, to join in that effort. I want to introduce Amy O'Gorman and Chuck Daldorf, two of my colleagues. Where is Chuck still here? There he is over there. Chuck's organizing this area, and they're happy to talk to you more about it. But we know that's not the end of our job. It's just the start of our job. But we first have to keep them from coming after us. I told Matt, it's not a Maginot Line that we're constructing. It's a secret wireless system that's going to zap them if they come across it. And the reason it's going to do that is because of this ability to force them to pay us back when we win in court. We're not naive enough to think that we've written the perfect ballot measure. You can never write the perfect ballot measure. You can't stop people from violating the Constitution. What you can do is make sure if they do it and you take them to court, you get paid back. And we think this measure does it. So Amy's going to talk to you more about it later. We hope you join us in this cause. I think the other causes you've heard about are certainly worthy. We happen to have a different approach to protecting local revenues than California Forward does, and we believe ours is better. Big surprise. But we have had plenty of discussions. Is it okay if I take the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the Local Taxpayer Public Safety and Transportation Protection Act is what we've named it. It will have a number later on once it qualifies for the ballot. We're in a similar situation, but I tell you, people are pulling these petitions out of people's hands to sign them so fast. The first three words say, prohibits the state. Those are very popular words, and people want to sign this. So if you haven't seen it already, when you do, you'll see what I mean. Okay.
All right, thank you,
Thank you very
Chris.
much.